My name is Julie Kraft and I have bipolar 2 disorder.
I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn and I live with bipolar 2 disorder.
I was diagnosed 10 years ago at the age of 36.
I was told of my diagnosis and I remember being relieved but also terrified. I know the perceptions and the stigma that goes along with it. I started sharing my story about 4 or 5 years ago.
I decided to come forward and start sharing. It's led to me meeting the most amazing people walking the same path.
So we had talked about collaborating. My greatest hope is that others will hear our stories and feel less alone.
We can offer insight and give the world a real life living example of what bipolar disorder can look like.
This is bipolar.
This is bipolar.
Hi everybody, welcome to episode 2 of This is Bipolar. My name is Shaley Hoogendoorn and I am a wife and a mama and a teacher and a mental health advocate. I also live with bipolar 2 disorder and I am passionate about telling stories and smashing stigma.
And I am Julie Kraft. I think it's fair to say I'm equally as passionate about advocating, sharing my bipolar 2 journey. I'm also a wife, a mom to 3 girls, an artist, an author. And so this stage of my life, I'm just really excited to be able to use some of those passions of mine and pour them into my advocacy efforts. So thrilled to be here, thrilled to be co-host of this show/podcast and excited to share.
Yeah. Before we get started, we just want to say, thank you. We had launch week last week and so many of you poured your heart out to us and supported us. And honestly, that just keeps us going. And when we get nervous about what we're doing or we wonder if it's going out to interweb nowhere, it reminds us that this is important work. So we just wanted to say thank you. If you haven't heard that episode, it's pretty juicy. So I would go back and listen.
Embarrassing photos included. And I'll echo what Shaley said. It can be nerve-wracking putting yourself out there, but to get the positive feedback and comments, it puts the wind in our sails to keep going, fuels our fire. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah. So we ended the last one kind of where we were like getting into our 20s and meeting our husbands. I think you talked a little bit about meeting him. So maybe I'll start with talking about how I met mine.
Yes, we need to hear your love story.
So if you heard the last one, there was the like life-shattering heartbreak of the broken engagement. Soon after, I came home and I didn't go back to my rental space. I ended up moving in with my parents for a bit just because I wasn't functioning and I didn't know what to do with myself. So I was actually coming back from a summer job when it happened. I was in Seychelles and I came back and I was supposed to be going to university and I did. I was awake for just the classes pretty much. And in fact, it's very dramatic when I came back because on the way back, I stayed a night in Vancouver and my whole bag of clothes got stolen. Then 2 weeks later, because of like not eating and feeling all weird and just, the state I was in, I fainted and I broke my nose kind of. It was all. Yeah. So not only did I not want to go into public because I knew everybody and they knew us and I didn't want to, people ask and then I have to tell the story again. Yeah. So anyways, so I remember just lying in my bed one day and I just remember, pleading with God, please don't make me go through this again. Like, I don't think my heart or my body can handle this. And I was like, so dramatic, like, I'm not going to date. Please let the next one be my husband. Right? Yeah. And And then I I went back to my church and I went to a young adults group, and I had been friends with Rob all along. We had we taught grade 9, like hung out in youth group, and we were like the leaders, and we just really, really got along. And in fact, because I was in a relationship, it was really comfortable and easy to talk about everything because there was no tension or anything like that. And so we were literally becoming best friends. Aww. And we just started hanging out more and more. And it was funny because we had this young adults group, and slowly people, in your 20s, like moving away or this or that. And then near the end, there was like just us. And so like we would go to the drive-in or the movies. And I remember one thing, shortly after I started going out in public again, I think it was like a couple weeks, I saw him of all places at the pool. I thought I wouldn't see anyone at the pool going to Aquafit with my mom, but of course I saw at the pool. And I remember that I had to say something because they asked where my ex was. And I remember he just hugged me and was just, just so kind. And many people acted awkward, but he didn't. And then we just started hanging out, and like slowly over a little bit, I was talking to a friend, and she's like, "You cannot stop talking about Rob." And I was like, "Aw, I know." And then I knew that I needed to make some kind of move because I knew he would get off at like 5. And I remember I would watch the clock and I'd be like, "Can I call him? It's 5:05. No, I should wait till 5:15. No, I should wait till 5:30. And so then, I told him, and luckily he felt the same way. And our relationship was pretty fast because we already had like 2 years of friendship and knowing everything about each other. So we were engaged within like 8 months, and then like married a year and a half later. So.
I have a quick question. So you mentioned that you knew him before.
Yeah.
Did he know of any of your struggles or anxieties? Had he walked through any of that with you? Were you able to share that, or did you then tell him after you guys sort of got romantically involved?
Well, I think he didn't. I think he saw some of the depression, right? Yeah. Because I was having a hard time going out and stuff like that. When I was first back, they would invite me to all the young adult things, and I declined for a while, which was confusing to people because I'm up for anything.
Yeah.
I'm an extreme extrovert. And so he probably saw the sad side, but probably just situational, right? Probably just assumed it was situational. And as I came out of it, I think he really enjoyed the excited me, because I did come out of it fairly quickly. I think it was something that was clearly supposed to happen. And I thought I was mourning more the idea than the actual relationship. So I would say, he didn't until the year, like after we were engaged, we moved down here, and we lived together before we got married. And I think that winter before the wedding, I think he would have noticed the depression. So you mentioned meeting your husband in the last one. How fast did you get married? Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, I mentioned a little bit before, also, we had a very fast-paced relationship. We had known each other a little bit as friends, and then I went through a terrible breakup, and he sort of was on the other side of that. And from the minute that we reconnected till the altar saying our I do's, it was 7 months to the day. So very quick. And he had no idea about any of my mental health struggles, my anxieties, none of that until we started dating. But I think when you start dating, you're falling in love. You want to put your best foot forward, your best face forward. And so there were little red flags here and there, but he's now said to me, all of those flags that you threw up while we were dating, I just figured you were maybe a little insecure. I figured, it was just a matter of me building you up with your confidence, and then we would all be good. But yes, for the most part, those 7 months were pretty smooth sailing. And I think once we did get married, though, I think the mask drops. You can't really hide all of your moods all the time. So that's really when the real me started showing through. So that's, in a little bit of a nutshell, that's our relationship. But like you, very quick, I knew everything clicked as far as, you know, our faith and how we viewed the world and what we wanted out of our lives. So 7 months, you know, my kids ask me, Mom, how did you know? Or that's lightning fast. But I just said, you know what? Even though I was 21 at the time, when you know, you know.
We've talked about how we feel strongly about things, and when we make decisions, we go after it, and there's no change in our minds. I'm curious about, and I don't think we have the answers to it, but I'm curious about if our bipolar fed into that a little bit, like the rush. I remember I was pretty, like I was ready. I was, do you know what I mean? I was this, and fast. So, luckily we're both still with our husbands, but it was quite fast, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah. And I'm not sure about your husband. My husband is the opposite of me in the best possible way. So he's very, I'll say stable, and I mean that in the best possible way, but very even keeled. He's exactly what I needed. Very funny, kind-hearted guy, but he is basically my constant, my rock. And so for him to get just as caught up in the romance, and I keep going back to the fact that he picked me. Even though I flew up the red flags, 7 months was his timeline too. And so I think even the two of us being so opposite, and me being wildly passionate about everything in my life, to know that he also was okay with that super fast, lightning fast timeline. I think then I really think, wow. So is your husband same as you, or,
No. So I'm like the artist and the creative, although he can definitely be those. He is actually a biologist. He's a scientist.
Wow.
So, and when we met, he was much more, like I was just starting university. I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I was just like kind of figuring things out. And he's 5 years older. So he was done his degree and had like his career. And so I think like he was more grounded, and I think that I clung to that a little bit, but then I brought out fun things in him. So same as you. And when people meet us, sometimes they're like, oh, because he's a bit more reserved too, but as soon as you get to know him, he's not serious, and he's super fun and funny. But yes, definitely opposites. I don't know if there was two of us, like in terms of personality and all the things, how that would work out. I want to go back to, you've mentioned a few times, and it's intriguing to me. What are these red flags that you speak of?
Okay, red flags. Well, one of my symptoms all throughout high school too was just overthinking. And if I didn't hear from someone, still to this day, if I don't hear back on a text, my mind will automatically default to the worst possible conclusion. They must hate my guts. I must have done something. And so it took a lot of reassuring on his part to calm that part of my mind. And then a few dramatic reactions. I just remember at one point I was ready to take my entire makeup bag and throw it out of the window of his truck and call off the wedding over some minor disagreement. And so overreactions to things, those were a lot of the red flags. And he would just sit there and say, I don't understand this dramatic reaction. I love you. You're my best friend. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Can we just talk this through? And so thank goodness I didn't throw my makeup out the window. A lot of money.
Settle down.
Those type of reactions. But, and I've asked him too, why didn't you run for the hills? Do you regret being stuck with me? And that's what I say to myself in my moments of deepest insecurity. And he said, I was falling madly in love with you unconditionally. And so none of those things scared me off. I knew I needed a little excitement in my life. And I knew if I married you, life would never be boring. So dramatic reactions, insecure reactions, those were the red flags that I threw up. But thank goodness he stuck around. And I think I have to keep reminding myself of that. Everybody has something. We all have our issues and our reactions, and we all need to learn to, get along with each other or figure out how we're each wired. And so I can now be confident and think, thank goodness, he stuck around. Of course he stuck around, and, he's not perfect either. So
yes, we had this discussion.
Yes.
We talked about how some people have said hurtful things in the past, and we talked about how sometimes either we get the vibe or some people flat out say it, like, how did they put up with you? Or you're so lucky they stuck around, or things like that. Yeah. I'm pretty sure people have said some I've probably overthinked.
It's a word. We make
up words. I made up, let's go with that. But yeah, I think that it's beautiful. And I think we both talked about that we like to focus on all the positivity that we bring, and that we're not someone to be managed. We are very lovable.
Very lovable.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk a lot about, there was a lot of years there for both of us in between that and our diagnosis, but I was wondering if you could walk me through kind of what a week would look like. I know we've talked about things, and ours is very different about cycles, but I'm very curious about how it presented in your life physically and in your thought life. In that span of years, was it different every year, day, week? I would love to hear.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So you had mentioned just in terms of a cycle or being able to predict your highs and your lows. I could never do that. And then throw into that, we had a lot of change. So within a year of being married, we moved from Canada down to Seattle. Okay. I became pregnant. We gave birth. Well, I gave birth. My husband was there, to our first daughter. And then within 8 months of that, we moved again to California. So a lot of physical moving, and that was very emotional too. My symptoms presented as just overwhelming, daily, constant, 24/7 anxiety. And then as a young mom, those anxieties, a lot of them revolved around my daughter, heading out in public, doing those mommy and me play dates, joining moms groups. And so I had trouble doing all of those things. As a teenager, phone calls were difficult, setting boundaries were difficult. So once I was married and became a mom, you need to deal with phone calls. And if you are going to set up a play date, you've got to communicate with people. So all of those things were a struggle. Add into that becoming a new mom, moving away and not having close friends. And so in those early years, my symptoms were really ongoing. And then of course I would have my periods of mania, which mostly presented as bursts of explosive creativity. So I would, a lot of it was we would move and have a new apartment. So I remember painting an entire Noah's Ark mural on my daughter's wall. So exciting times like that. And then the depressive episodes that I would experience, thank goodness I had a baby. So I just used her as my excuse to hide away, and so we watched Teletubbies and Blue's Clues. I'm aging myself now, but I was able to kind of hide behind my daughter a lot of the time. And so as a young mom, that's how my life sort of looked like. And then our second daughter was born within 3.5 years. We moved yet again. We were in California at the time. And so I just remember a lot of anxiety. And we did have certain friendships, but always that constant worry. And that did continue right up until my diagnosis.
Question for you, for our listeners that don't, we throw around this word anxiety now like a daily thing. Everybody talks about having anxiety. I'd love to hear the depth of our anxiety is a lot different. And I would love to hear, you said you have anxiety about like the phone calls or going out or those kinds of things. Can you tell me what's going on in your head? What, overthinking, what are you thinking about these things? What was your core fear, or if you know?
And thank goodness now, being in my 40s, I've had a lot of time, and through, therapy, I've had a lot of time to look back and reflect. And I've been able to pinpoint a few reasons why. And so the phone calls and the spur of the moment invitations, it was because I could never say no or set a boundary. I felt like saying no to someone would destroy our relationship or seem selfish on my part. And so what was happening was, I was either avoiding the phone altogether or emails because I just didn't have the strength or the tools to answer. Or I would answer and in that moment say yes to whatever that person wanted, whether it was, donating one of my organs, or once I took on a job to faux paint a woman's living room. I made a complete mess of her living room. I spilt paint everywhere. And so thank goodness now I've come to a place where I know when I should say no. And I also have equipped myself with tools so that phone calls aren't as life-threatening. And so not being able to say no and set boundaries was basically the underlying reason of why I was so terrified and threatened by phone calls. The other thing, I had fears of getting gas. I had fears of driving. And in California, you need to take 8 freeways to get anywhere. So a lot of those anxieties came out because of the fear of the unknown. So getting gas was always a fear. But once my husband took me to the gas station, walked me through it, the minute I've done something once and I'm familiar with it, the anxiety is gone. So for me, it's the challenge is getting through that initial fear. But once I've driven on a road and I know I'm not going to get lost, and I will say I was a speaker at one of your amazing events, and I had never driven to that part of Canada, the Lower Mainland. And so I think I arrived in a world upstate, and I just said, like, Shaley, I'm going to need a few minutes to calm down because I was driving in an unfamiliar area. I had never been there. But the minute now, if I needed to come to the same place, anxiety is low or very minimal. Same with, parking, even parking, parallel parking, can't do it to save my life. But if someone takes the time to say, here's where you're going to park. You're going to need $2. There's a meter. The minute I know those details, the anxiety is dealt with. So I had a lot of anxiety, just fear of the unknown. And then a lot of it was just insecurity and self-esteem. And I don't know if just with the years, I've grown more confident. And it's funny, since coming forward with my journey, I'm far more confident in everything. And I think I've realized even if I did have to attempt parallel parking 20 times, I'm able to say, not my gift. Give me a canvas and some paints and I'll knock that out of the park, but make me actually try to park. It's not going to happen. So those are some of the root causes. But yes, when we're talking about anxiety, I mean, this was to the point where my mind could never relax, even on holiday. And now to realize that was so much of that was inside here. And so much of where I am today is learning to deal with my brain.
Yeah, one of the things that parking is also a thing for me, big time. Especially if I get a new vehicle and I'm not sure quite how. I remember when I got a van, how long it is or that kind of thing, and I'd panic or I would do a terrible job. And then parallel parking, I was awesome when I first got my license or whatever. And I could probably parallel park if there was 0 people around, but I get all stressed out. And I think just in case there's people listening that are trying to figure out if their anxiety is needing to look into their anxiety as being more as regular or situational anxiety, is how does it impact your daily life? And I hear you saying that. And I think some of the things that I was listening to one of my friends' podcasts, we should record this last night, and the therapist was talking, and she was talking about our brains and how we have the amygdala in there, and how when that gets the message that we're scared or nervous or something, it can't figure out if we're getting chased by a bear or about to get in an accident, or if we're nervous getting gas. And so it sends messages to your body to do the things for the worst case scenario. So when we say we're having anxiety, we're talking about like the type of anxiety that you have when the very worst thing is happening for a very small thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't realize that it was anxiety, because I was out and about. In fact, when I had kids, I was even more scared to be at home and alone. So I would be up and showered and out with those kids, like, even though they were 21 months, 22, whatever, they were about 2 years apart. And I was out and everyone's like, oh, look at Shaley, you're always out, you're showered or whatever. But that was a coping mechanism for me to not be home with anxious thoughts. But I didn't recognize the anxiety because mine doesn't present as big fears of things. Mine presents as my biggest one is making the wrong decision. So I work backwards. So, and it served me well in some things until it didn't. I think backwards, and I think that helps me with teaching and event planning, things I do. I think of the absolute worst thing that could happen, or all the things that could happen to go wrong, and I work backwards of how I could avoid those, right? And so the only problem with that is that I couldn't possibly think of everything. And then when those things did happen, like, I remember just being so upset with myself if, like, I didn't have, maybe I forgot the change of clothes for the baby, or I didn't have sunscreen, or it's just like, in my head, I'd be like, you are like, how could you not think of that? This is all your fault. How could you not, you didn't have enough snacks, those kind of things. And I would beat myself up about it. Or if I plan an event, because I actually am the opposite of you, I ran a mom's group. Because I wanted to be with people all the time. When I'm with people, I felt more normal, because I could catastrophize when I was alone. Like, I could take my thoughts to keep going. Whereas if I was with other people, I could keep it under wraps. And I didn't know that till a lot later. But also it presented in anger. And mostly with my husband or my parents or people that were close to me, not so much with my children, just because I'm a kid person. Like, that state, like, I always wish I could go back. Like, that stage, like 0 to like grade 2 is like my jam. Now is another story, and we're going to do a whole episode on motherhood. But it was, my anxiety was hard to diagnose, because usually my anxiety was in hypomania, and it was usually like, I'm frustrated with people that can't keep up. I'm frustrated with people that, with the ideas, I'm indecisive. So I'm actually frustrating people, because we will talk, like my husband and I will talk about it. We'll come to a decision, and then I'll be like, but what about? And then I'll backtrack and want to make a different decision, or not sure. And he's like, wait a minute, we just made it. And I'm like, yeah, but we didn't think of all the worst case scenarios, right? And so it took me a long time, because I didn't have, like, they show it on TV and things like that, of just being scared of things. But mine, it was really reassuring to me when I was diagnosed, or when I did start understanding that this anger is because of different hormones in my body, and not just that I was a terrible, angry person. Because already you're not supposed to be angry, like, as a woman, right? And then second, in the church, like, you're meek, and what I was not the opposite of meek. And so, which leads me to asking you, We've even had to look up what this means because people throw around the terms so easily.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about anxiety attacks and panic attacks. And panic attacks are something that most people with mental health issues have. Anxiety attacks are usually, from what I understand, not a doctor, also not a great memory. Anxiety is usually like situational, whereas panic is the whole thinking that you know you're in this situation and your brain is shutting down and can't make good decisions. So my question to you is, did you have panic attacks? You know, what more did your anxiety look like?
This is fascinating. And I know we're friends and hosts and we talk all the time, but I think this is so amazing for myself, but also our listeners to be able to hear two very different experiences of bipolar 2 and how it presents as wives and moms. Because for people out there, I just assumed everyone had the same sort of symptoms. But as far as actual panic attacks, and what I've read of what they are, I don't believe I've ever actually had an episode or a panic attack.
Wow.
Where I could pinpoint. For me, it was just this overwhelming, always present fears, anxieties, and insecurities. And you know, my husband once asked me, could you please do a brain dump of all of the thoughts, worries, fears spinning around your head? And I was just shooting them out, and I got to the end when I finished. It was quite a while, and he just said, how do you live like that? Every single day must be such a struggle. And it was, and I kind of just figured that everyone at least had some of those. And he said, I don't think of any of those ever. I don't give a second thought to how I walk down the street. I don't give a second thought to which leg goes in front of the other. At the restaurant, if the waitress gave me a certain look or didn't take my order quick enough, I thought, she hates me. She hates me. We have to leave the restaurant. Let's go. She's going to spit in my food. And so I think once I opened up and shared that with my husband and found out that not everybody lives with that level of anxiety, that was actually part of me sort of realizing, you know what, maybe this isn't everyone's experience, and maybe this anxiety is on a next level, another level where I need to get some help. But as far as actual panic attacks, I don't think I've ever had one. How about you?
Yeah, I can hear what you're saying. I can have days where it feels like it's in my chest and up here. I wake up and I feel my heart's a bit, and I feel like everything is very urgent. Like if I think of someone and I think of something that has been done or something I've forgotten, it is so urgent. And I afterwards, I usually feel guilt or whatever because I have to get a hold of that person. And I was better with friends, but like my parents are calling at weird hours or waking up my husband because these things are so urgent. And it could be like, or like I had to buy something immediately. Otherwise this would, change my life. And I think that a lot of it was trying to escape the anxiety. So back to panic attacks.
Yeah.
It comes in my body first.
Wow.
And I've now learned as a teacher, we talk about sensory issues. And I was like, it gave me words, because when I am anxious, it's like too hot or too cold or too itchy and I feel like everything's coming at me. Like everything feels aggressive. Like the sun is aggressive, like noises. And I can't focus. And my rationale goes, and I'm just trying to stop feeling like this. So I'll do anything to stop feeling like this. Luckily, I had a good support system, because I always say, like, I absolutely understand why people get into addictions, because honestly, if I didn't have the support systems I had, and when I was feeling my worst, if you would have said this will make you feel better, I don't know, if I didn't have support, I might have done that. I have complete passion for that. And so that was kind of like the ongoing anxiety. But the panic attack, it was when I would have trouble breathing. I would get nauseous. I kept taking pregnancy tests, even though I knew I wasn't pregnant, because I couldn't understand why I was nauseous and couldn't eat all day. But that was that was a state of anxiety. And it's really in my chest. And I have trouble breathing. That's why a lot of people think they're having heart attacks.
Yeah.
And when they're having a panic attack. And actually, I'll wait till the next episode when we do right up to leading to our diagnosis to walk you through my most infamous panic attack.
See, this is so, even for me, because I've never had one, to hear the term panic attack, even, you know, if someone says, and for someone like me that hasn't experienced it, it's so easy for me to say, you know, here, have a drink of water, take a deep breath, you're fine. But to actually hear you articulate exactly how you're feeling, this just gives a whole new level of insight. And I think this is going to help those people alongside or our friends to sort of, even if they can understand what it's like. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Living in a constant, I can't imagine. I think too, like, that's where I can tie in where the anger comes from, is because the not understanding, or the, even though people that love me, I can listen now a bit, and medicated now, I can take a step back. But during it, if you told me to calm down, or that I'm being dramatic, or here's a glass of water,
see, good thing.
Water is going in, like, no, like, and I think that's where the anger comes in, is not not feeling misunderstood. That's like one of my, like, you know how you have big lies that you tell yourself. One of them is being misunderstood. And before we end this episode, I wanted to just talk about, we didn't quite get to the feelings of depression, so we'll bring that in the next one, because the anxiety one is, there's so much to share about that. One thing I was wondering, we've talked about this before, in that period, okay, so before, because how many years? Before, from when you got married, you got diagnosed
13 years, I believe. I was 36, married when I was 21. I've never been good at math, so we'll let the listeners, the viewers, figure that out.
Yeah, fun thing.
Too many years, and that's one of the things that I look back with, and I, you know, can have a good cry about just all of those years that it took for me to get to a place of getting help. But it was far too long. It's all part of my journey. But I think back and just, wow, that was a lot of hurt and heartache that I probably could have prevented. And so I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm coming forward. If I can help even one person, and I think for us to describe what life looked like before, if I can help even one person sit back after watching this and go, wow, she kind of described the way I'm living right now, and it's really been a struggle. You know, that's part of the reason that I'm out here. But 13 long years.
In those years, what I'm wondering, and I know we've talked about this before, in those years, was the narrative inside your head, everyone else feels like this is normal, or was it, I'm different, there's something wrong? You know, which one, or did you go back and forth?
Great question. I think it was maybe a bit of both. And it was all overshadowed, I think, by this tremendous amount of pride that I had. And so that prevented me, I think, from talking about it, from reaching out to find out if other people lived that way. My husband was really my only sounding board, but I don't even know if he understood how much I was struggling.
So for me, I always knew. I knew that there was a better way to live. I knew, especially in the depressions, I knew other people didn't, because I put feelers out there. I wasn't, I had a half mask, right? Because I would put things out there. I would put things out there like, you know, I'm feeling really, really down, or I feel like that makes me really, really nervous, but I didn't have like the language, or, and other people didn't understand that it was next level. But I did know, and I did, throughout times, went for help at different times. It wasn't like leading up to the big diagnosis. I went on antidepressants in university. They did nothing. So, but it was on and off. And it was I always reached out for help during the depressive episodes because I thought I was just depressed, because I didn't understand that in the hypomania, it was such a beautiful time compared to the depression, that I didn't see the anxiety or any of those symptoms because it was so much better that I didn't care. I didn't care to look into that because I just didn't want to feel like that. And so I think one of the things that we need to cover on our next episode is really what a depressive episode is, because it's so much easier for us to talk about the anxiety and the mania because it's really interesting. And I think people understand that a little bit less. So we will definitely go into that.
So much to go into.
Yeah, so much sharing. Thank you again for being honest. I know I'm just, I think that the way that we communicate together, people probably think we've been friends for years and years and years, but a lot of what you're saying is new to me. And so taking that in and just feeling for you and just, thank you with all of that happening to you, the fact that you're here and sharing and turning it into something beautiful.
Don't make me cry.
Okay.
It's a miracle I haven't cried, but I feel the same. You know, yes, we know each other, but I think it's beautiful that we're learning. You know, I'm learning right along with the listeners right now. And I wouldn't know any of this if you weren't willing to come forward and share. And I think we both realize the value if we don't come forward and open up our minds for the rest of the world to hop in. People will never get that greater understanding of what it's like to live with a bipolar 2 brain. So right back at you.
That is our deepest hope, right? That is our deepest hope, to comfort those or encourage them to get help, but also teach people that just don't understand. So thank you for being here, everybody, and keep tuned because it's going to get much more interesting.
Yes.